Good evening, everyone. This is an unscheduled story time. I made this beautiful living room from deep AI, and the cat and the dog, they're relaxing. They're all stretched out and comfy, and I've collected my hot dinner and my bottle of water. You know how much I love to hydrate. I hope you've hydrated today. If not, have some water right now and help yourself out. Now, I do owe you a couple of tuck-in and chill nights, and so I thought I'd pay you back one right now while I'm awake and have the energy to do it. Now, here you are in my virtual living room, so if you hear me cough or sneeze, just ignore it. That's what would happen if you were really visiting my real living room anyways. I'm going to be slurping down my dinner as we do our thing. But I was looking for public domain Christmas stories, and I didn't want to necessarily make it about Christmas per se, because we all celebrate different religions and cultural celebrations, but I mean, it is a time of year where lots of people are getting presents and giving presents, even birthday presents right now. Oh, there we go. Just ignore that. And I found Grimm's fairy tales had a few public domain stories, and this one is called The Elves and the Shoemaker. It was first published in 1905 in English. It comes from Germany, and basically it's about evil and good. It's a fairy tale. It's a folk tale. And you might say, well, the Grimm fairy tales, their original versions were kind of gross. They're kind of horrifying. But as I mentioned in the episode description, well, before there were TV and movies, before everyone could read and have lots of fairy tale books in their house for entertainment, the stories leading up to Christmas Day were really to scare children into behaving well. So they're much more Halloweeny, with real life lessons, you could say, for the vices that we may have. So I want you to sit back and relax. If you're studying, if you're just chilling with a hot cup of whatever you love to drink, cocoa, tea, coffee, hot milk, hot water with a splash of citrus or cranberry juice. It's all very yummy. How about a slice of orange? That's always a pick-me-up. I love the smell of oranges. Toss one into my hot water. Now, let's begin. Grimm's Fairy Tales by the Grimm brothers, the Elves, and the Shoemaker. There was once a shoemaker who worked very hard and was very honest, but still he could not earn enough to live upon, and at last all he had in the world was gone, save just leather enough to make one pair of shoes. Then he cut his leather out, all ready to make up the next day, meaning to rise early in the morning to his work. His conscience was clear and his heart light amidst all his troubles. So he went peaceably to bed, left all his cares to heaven, and soon he fell asleep. In the morning, after he had said his prayers, he sat himself down to his work, when, to his great wonder, there stood the shoes all ready made upon the table. The good man knew not what to say or think at such an odd thing happening. He looked at the workmanship. There was not one false stitch in the whole job. All was so neat and true that it was quite a masterpiece. The same day, a customer came in, and the shoes suited him so well that he willingly paid a price higher than usual for them. And the poor shoemaker, with the money, bought leather enough to make 2 pairs more. In the evening he cut out the work and went to bed early, that he might get up and begin bedtimes next day. But he was saved all the trouble, for when he got up in the morning, the work was done, ready to his hand. Soon in came buyers, who paid him handsomely for his goods, so that he bought leather enough for 4 pair more. He cut out the work again overnight, and found it done in the morning, as before, and so it went on for some time, that was got ready in the evening was always done by daybreak, and the good man soon became thriving and well off again. One evening, about Christmas time, as he and his wife were sitting over the fire chatting together, he said to her, "I should like to sit up and watch tonight, that we may see who it is that comes and does my work for me." The wife liked the thought, so they left a light burning and hid themselves in a corner of the room, behind a curtain that was hung up there, and they watched what would happen. As soon as it was midnight, there came in 2 little naked dwarfs, and they sat themselves upon the shoemaker's bench, took up all the work that was cut out, and began to ply with their little fingers, stitching and rapping and tapping away at such a rate that the shoemaker was all wonder, and could not take his eyes off them. And on they went, till the job was quite done, and the shoes stood ready for use upon the table. This was long before daybreak, and then they bustled away as quick as lightning. The next day the wife said to the shoemaker, "These little wights have made us rich, and we ought to be thankful to them, and do them a good turn if we can. I'm quite sorry to see them run about as they do, and indeed it's not very decent, for they have nothing upon their backs to keep off the cold. I'll tell you what, I will make each of them a shirt and a coat and a waistcoat and a pair of pantaloons into the bargain, and you make each of them a little pair of shoes." The thought pleased the good cobbler very much, and one evening, when all the things were ready, they laid them on the table, instead of the work that they had used to cut out, and then they went on and hid themselves to watch what the little elves would do. About midnight, in they came, dancing and skipping, hopping round the room, and then went to sit down to their work as usual. When they saw the clothes lying for them, they laughed and chuckled, and seemed mightily delighted. Then they dressed themselves in the twinkling of an eye, and danced and capered and sprang about, as merry as could be, till at last they danced out at the door, and away over the green. The good couple saw them no more, but everything went well with them from that time forward, as long as they lived. I think that was a very, very sweet story. All right, here comes another one. Grimm's fairy tale. It's called The Turnip. I actually really like turnips when you put them in like a one-pot meal or a stew. I find them very tasty and a good alternative to potatoes, and they're also very colorful. So The Turnip was written by the Grimm brothers in the year 1905, again in the English language. Again, origin Germany. So let's have a listen. This is again fairy tales with good and evil. There were 2 brothers who were both soldiers. The one was rich and the other poor. The poor man thought he would try to better himself, so pulling off his red coat, he became a gardener, and dug his ground well, and sowed turnips. When the sea came up, there was one plant bigger than all the rest, and it kept getting larger and larger, and it seemed as if it would never cease growing, so that it might have been called the Prince of Turnips, for there never was such a one seen before, and never will again. At last it was so big that it filled a cart, and 2 oxen could hardly draw it, and the gardener knew not what in the world to do with it, nor whether it would be a blessing or a curse to him. One day he said to himself, "What shall I do with it? If I sell it, it will bring no more than another, and for eating, the little turnips are better than this. The best thing perhaps is to carry it and give it to the king as a mark of respect." Then he yanked his oxen and drew the turnip to the court and gave it to the king. "What a wonderful thing," said the king. "I've seen many strange things, but such a monster as this I never saw. Where did you get the seed? Or is it your only good luck? If so, you're a true child of fortune." "Ah, no," answered the gardener, "I am no child of fortune, I'm a poor soldier who never could get enough to live upon, so I laid aside my red coat and set to work, tilling the ground. To have a brother, and he's rich, and your majesty knows him well, and all the world knows him. But because I'm poor, everybody forgets me." The king then took pity on him and said, "You shall be poor no longer. I will give you so much that you shall even be richer than your brother." Then he gave him gold and lands and flocks, and made him so rich that his brother's fortune could not at all be compared to him. When the brother heard of all of this, and how a turnip had made the gardener so rich, he envied him sorely, and bethought himself how he could contrive to get the same good fortune for himself. However, he determined to manage more cleverly than his brother, and got together a rich present of gold and fine horses for the king, and thought he must have a much larger gift in return, for if his brother had received so much for such a little turnip, what must his present be worth? The king took the gift very graciously, and said he knew not what to give in return more valuable and wonderful than the great turnip, so the soldier was forced to put it into a cart and drag it home with him. When he reached home, he knew not upon whom to vent his rage and spite, and at length wicked thoughts came into his head, and he resolved to kill his brother. So he hired some villains to murder him, and having shown them where to lie in ambush, he went to his brother, and he said, "Dear brother, I have found a hidden treasure. Let us go and dig it up and share it between us." The others had no suspicion of his roguery, and they went out together, and as they were traveling along, the murderers rushed out upon him, bound him, and they were going to hang him on a tree. But whilst they were getting all ready, they heard the trampling of a horse at a distance, which so frightened them that they pushed their prisoner's neck and shoulders together into a sack, and swung him up by a cord to the tree, where they left him dangling, and they ran away. Meantime he worked away till he made a hole large enough to put his head out. When the horseman came up, he proved to be a student, a merry fellow, who was journeying along in his nag, and singing as he went. As soon as the man in the sack saw him passing under the tree, he cried out, "Good morning! Good morning to thee, my friend!" The student looked about everywhere, and seeing no one, and not knowing where the voice came from, he cried out, "Who calls me?" Then the man in the tree answered, "Lift up thine eyes, for behold here I sit in the sack of wisdom. Here have I, in a short time, learned great and wondrous things. Compared to this seed, all the learning of the schools is an empty air. A little longer, and I shall know all that man can know, and shall come forth wiser than the wisest of mankind. Here I discern the signs and motions of the heavens and the stars, the laws that control the winds, the number of the sands on the seashore, the healing of the sick, and virtues all simples, birds, and precious stones. Wert thou but once here, my friend, thou wouldst feel and own the power of knowledge." "Thou wouldst indeed." The student listened to all this and wondered much. At last he spoke. "Blessed be the day and hour when I found you, and cannot you contrive to let me into the sack for a little while?" Then the other answered, as if very unwillingly, "A little space I may allow thee to sit here, if thou wilt reward me well and entreat me kindly, but thou must tarry yet in an hour below, till I have learnt some little matters that are yet unknown to me." So the student sat himself down and awaited a while. But the time hung heavy upon him, and he begged earnestly that he might ascend forthwith, for his thirst for knowledge was great. Then the other pretended to give way. "Thou must let the sack of wisdom descend by untying yonder cord, and then thou shalt enter." So the student let him down, opened the sack, and set him free. "Now then," he cried, "let me ascend quickly." As he began to put himself into the sack, heels first. "Wait a while," said the gardener. "That is not the way." Then he pushed him in head first, tied up the sack, and soon swung up the searcher after wisdom, dangling in the air. "How is it with thee, friend? He said. Dost thou not feel that wisdom comes into thee? Rest there in peace, until thou art a wiser man than thou wert. So saying, he trotted off on the student's nag and left the poor fellow to gather wisdom till somebody should come and let him down. That actually was pretty funny. Now, I haven't been looking, but let's take a look and see. All right. I think we have time for one more. I think I do owe you 3. Let's see what else I can find. Let's see. We could stick with Grimm. Let's just take a look at other things from the same year. Oh, and while I do that, gotta make sure my chat area is open. Hang on there. Just gotta make sure. Alrighty. Okay, let's see. I think that was actually a pretty funny one. Interesting. So I'm looking for things printed in 1905 that would be in the public domain by the Grimm brothers. Alright, I found one here from 1905 written by the Grimm brothers called The Lily and the Lion. I think that sounds very pretty. Let me just eat a little bit of my dinner and then we'll begin. Here we go. I just slurped up a good hot meal. All right. Grimm's Fairy Tales by Grimm Brothers, The Lily and the Lion from 1905. Also, Fairy Tales of Good and Evil. A merchant who had 3 daughters was once setting out upon a journey, but before he went he asked each daughter what gift he should bring back for her. The eldest wished for pearls, the second for jewels, but the third, who was called Lily, said, "Dear father, bring me a rose." Now, it was no easy task to find a rose, for it was the middle of winter, yet, as she was his prettiest daughter, and was very fond of flowers, her father said he would try what he could do. So he kissed all 3 and bid them goodbye. When the time came for him to go home, he had bought pearls and jewels for the 2 eldest, but he had sought everywhere in vain for the rose, and when he went into any garden and asked for such a thing, the people laughed at him, and they asked him whether he thought roses grew in snow. This grieved him very much, for Lily was his dearest child, and as he was journeying home, thinking what he should bring her, he came to a fine castle, and around the castle was a garden, in one half of which it seemed to be summertime, and in the other half winter. On one side the finest flowers were in full bloom, and on the other everything looked dreary and buried in snow. "A lucky hit," said he, as he called to the servant and told him to go and to a beautiful bed of roses that was there, and bring him away one of the finest flowers. This done, they were riding away well pleased, when up sprang a fierce lion and roared, "Whoever has stolen my roses shall be eaten up alive." Then the man said, "I knew not that the garden belonged to you. Can nothing save my life?" "No," said the lion, "nothing unless you undertake to give me whatever meets you on your return home. If you agree to this, I will give you your life, and the rose too for your daughter." But the man was unwilling to do so, and said, "It may be my youngest daughter, who loves me most, and always runs to meet me when I go home." Then the servant was gratefully frightened, and said, "It may perhaps be only a cat or a dog." And at last the man yielded with a heavy heart, and took the rose, and said he would give the lion whatever should meet him first on his return. And as he came near home, it was Lily, his youngest and dearest daughter, that met him. She came running and kissed him and welcomed him home, and when she saw that he had brought her the rose, she was still more glad. But her father began to be very sorrowful, and to weep, saying, "Alas, my dearest child, I have bought the flower at a high price, for I have said I would give you to a wild lion, and when he has you, he will tear you to pieces and eat you." Then he told her all that had happened, and said she should not go, let whatever happen to him. But she comforted him and said, "Dear father, the word you have given must be kept. I will go to the lion and soothe him. Perhaps he will let me come safe home again." The next morning she asked the way she was to go, and took leave of her father, and went forth with a bold heart into the wood. But the lion was an enchanted prince. By day he and all his court were lions, but in the evening they took their right forms again. When Lily came to the castle, he welcomed her so courteously that she agreed to marry him. The wedding feast was held, and they lived happily together a long time. The prince was only to be seen as soon as evening came, and then he held his court. But every morning he left his bride and went away by himself. She knew not whither till the night came again. After some time he said to her, "Tomorrow there will be a great feast in your father's house, for your eldest sister is to be married, and if you wish to go and visit her, my lion shall lead you thither." Then she rejoiced much at the thought of seeing her father once more, and set out with the lions, and everyone was overjoyed to see her, for they had thought her dead long since. But she told them how happy she was, and stayed till the feast was over, and then went back to the wood. Her second sister was soon after married, and when Lily was asked to go to the wedding, she said to the prince, "I will not go alone this time, you must go with me." But he would not, and said that it would be a very hazardous thing, for if the least ray of the torchlight should fall upon him, his enchantment would still worsen, for he should be changed into a dove and be forced to wander about the world for 7 long years. However, she gave him no rest, and she would take care no light should fall upon him. So at last they set out together, and took with them their little child, and she chose a large hall with thick walls for him to sit in while the wedding torches were lighted up. But unluckily no one saw that there was a crack in the door. Then the wedding was held with great pomp, but as the train came from the church and passed with the torches before the hall, a very small ray of light fell upon the prince. In a moment he disappeared, and when his wife came in and looked for him, she found only a white dove, and it said to her, 7 years I must fly up and down over the face of the earth, but every now and then I will let fall a white feather that will show you the way I am going. Follow it, and at last you may overtake and set me free." This said, he flew out at the door, and poor Lily followed, and every now and then a white feather fell, and showed her the way she was to journey. Thus she went roving on through the wild world, and looked neither to the right hand nor to the left, nor took any rest for 7 years. Then she began to be glad, and thought to herself that the time was fast coming when all her troubles should end. Yet repose was still far off, for one day, as she was traveling on, she missed the white feather, and when she lifted up her eyes she could nowhere see the dove. Now, thought she to herself, no aid of man can be of use to me. So she went to the sun and said, Thou shinest everywhere, on the hill's top and the valley's depth. Hast thou anywhere seen my white dove? No, said the sun, I have not seen it, but I will give thee a casket. Open it when thy hour of need comes. So she thanked the sun, and went on her way till eventide. When the moon arose, she cried unto it, and said, Thou shinest through the night, over field and grove. Hast thou nowhere seen my white dove? No, said the moon, I cannot help thee, but I will give thee an egg. Break it when need comes. Then she thanked the moon, and went on till night wind blew, and she raised up her voice to it, and said, Thou blowest through every tree and under every leaf. Hast thou not seen my white dove? No, said the night wind, but I will ask 3 other winds. Perhaps they have seen it. Then the east wind and the west wind came, and said they had not seen it. But the south wind said, I have seen the white dove. He has fled to the Red Sea, and is changed once more into a lion, for the 7 years are passed away, and there he is fighting with a dragon, and the dragon is an enchanted princess who seeks to separate him from you. Then the night wind said, I will give thee counsel. Go to the Red Sea. On the right shore stand many rods. Count them, and when thou countest to the 11th, break it off, and smite the dragon with it, and so the lion will have the victory, and both of them will appear to you in their own forms. Then look round, and thou wilt see a griffin, winged like bird, sitting by the Red Sea. Jump on to his back with thy beloved one as quickly as possible, and he will carry you over the waters to your home. I will also give thee this nut, continued the night wind. When you are halfway over, throw it down, and out of the waters will immediately spring up a high nut tree, in which the griffin will be able to rest. Otherwise he would not have the strength to bear you and the whole way. If therefore thou dost forget to throw down the nut, he will let you both fall into the sea. So our poor wanderer went forth, and found all as the night wind had said. And she plucked the 11th rod, and smote the dragon. The lion forthwith became a prince, and the dragon a princess again. But no sooner was the princess released from the spell than she seized the prince by the arm and sprang onto the griffin's back, and went off carrying the prince away with her. Thus the unhappy traveler was again forsaken and forlorn. But she took heart and said, As far as the winds blow, and as long as I can cock crows, I will journey on till I find him once again. She went on for a long, long way, till at length she came to the castle whither the princess had carried the prince, and there was a feast got ready, and she heard that the wedding was about to be held. Heaven and me now, she said, and she took the casket that the sun had given her, and found that within it lay a dress as dazzling as the sun itself. So she put it on, and went into the palace, and all the people gazed upon her, and the dress pleased the bride so much that she asked whether it was to be sold. Not for gold and silver, she said, but for flesh and blood. The princess asked what she meant, and she said, Let me speak with the bridegroom this night in his chamber, and I will give thee the dress. At last the princess agreed, but she told her chamberlain to give the prince a sleeping draught, that he might not hear or see her. When evening came, and the prince had fallen asleep, she was led into his chamber, and she sat herself down at his feet, and said, I have followed thee 7 years. I have been to the sun and the moon and the night wind, to seek thee. I'm so sorry. And at last I have helped thee to overcome the dragon. Wilt thou then forget me quite? But the prince all the time slept so soundly that her voice only passed over him and seemed like the whistling of the wind among the fir trees. Then poor Lily was led away and forced to give up the golden dress. And when she saw that there was no help for her, she went out into a meadow and sat herself down and wept. But as she sat, she bethought herself of the egg that the moon had given her, and when she broke it, there ran out a hen and 12 chickens of pure gold. That played about, and then nestled under the old one's wings, so as to form the most beautiful sight in the world. She rose up and drove them before her, till the bride saw them from her window, and was so pleased that she came forth and asked her if she would sell the brood. Not for gold or silver, but for flesh and blood, let me again this evening speak with the bridegroom in his chamber, and I will give thee the whole brood. Then the princess thought to betray her as before, and agreed to what she asked. But when the prince went to his chamber, he asked the chamberlain why the wind had whistled so in the night. And the chamberlain told him all how he had given him a sleeping draught, and how a poor maiden had come and spoken to him in his chamber, and was to come again that night. And the prince took care to throw away the sleeping draught. And when Lily came and began again to tell him what woes had befallen her, and how faithful and true to him she had been, he knew his beloved wife's voice, and sprang up and said, "You have awakened me as from a dream, for the strange princess had thrown a spell around me, so that I had altogether forgotten you, but heaven hath sent you to me in a lucky hour." And they stole away out of the palace by night unawares, and seated themselves on the griffin, who flew back with them over the Red Sea. When they were halfway across, Lily let the nut fall into the water, and immediately a large nut tree arose from the sea, whereupon the griffin rested for a while, and then carried them safely home. There they found their child, now grown up, to be comely and fair, and after all their troubles they had lived happily together to the end of their days. Aww. These are the stories of the Brothers Grimm. I hope they gave you the warm fuzzies as they did for me. And I wish you all a wonderful evening. And I'll see you next time. Tomorrow night we'll be live for Tuck In and Chill. Let's hope I don't fall asleep for that one.